Hey all, here are OS Reviews. Today we're taking a look back at the Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Carbon 3rd Gen here in 2023. This is a model that was released in 2015, and it's crazy to think that now we're up to the 11th gen model already. This is far from the newest unit out there. But I think it'll be interesting to see how an older model like this has aged, and more importantly, it can now be found as a budget laptop for under $100. Of course, the X1 Carbon line was the flagship Halo series for Lenovo's ThinkPads, which all look kind of similar from afar. However, it's only when you look a little bit closely do you see some differences versus the cheaper ThinkPads. Instead of being built out of polycarbonate plastic, it's clad in carbon fiber, hence the name X1 Carbon, in addition to reinforced with magnesium and aluminum inside. So it's a lot more sturdy, and perhaps more importantly, it also is the lightest 14-inch Ultraportable. So the base model here was only around 2.8 pounds, which is even now quite light and extremely slim for a laptop of its class. With that being said, of course, newer laptops that came out afterwards managed to be even slimmer. The ThinkPad X1 Carbon line all have glass trackpads as well, which are going to be just a little bit more smooth and premium to the touch compared to plastic, which is used on almost all of the other lines. Similar to older MacBooks, on the ThinkPad logo, the eye here will actually flash when the unit is turned on. We have just a Lenovo logo that has since been redesigned on newer units. And the texture is also interesting. It's a little bit more grippy than plain aluminum, for instance, but also if you wipe it down with a wet cloth, it kind of shimmers in the light. Otherwise, we have ventilation grills on the edges. This is, of course, not a fanless machine, though it is extremely slim and relatively energy efficient, with a pretty large 50 watt-hour cell that can last up to 10 hours of usage when it was new. Of course, batteries will degrade, and these days, most of the used ones will get you around, say, 5 hours or so of endurance, but you can always swap out the cell. And there's also a full-size USB Type A port, which supports 3.0 speeds. There's also access to a Kingston lock, and then on the left-hand spine, there was the ThinkPad kind of proprietary charger, providing up to 65 watts. Also, in newer ThinkPads, they have since transitioned to universal USB Type-C, but it is what it is. At least this charger is reversible, and it's still quite fast. There is a full-sized HDMI port, which is awesome for connecting to external displays and TVs. There's even a second mini display port on the side as well, if you want to connect to two displays at once, and then another USB 3.0 port, along with a standard 3.5mm headphone jack. Located on the top spine were, of course, the metal hinges that could fold completely flat, along with an optional cellular model that could also hold a SIM card. Finally, the back here just continues with a bit of soft touch rubber feet, ventilation grills, and you do have also the stereo speakers. I don't think the placement here is the best, but it still does its job. And more importantly, the base plate here is also made out of magnesium alloy, so it is cold and reassuring to the touch. Now, the laptop here came originally with Windows 8, but has since been upgradable to Windows 11. Now, the hinge on the 3rd gen X1 Carbon, though, wasn't really accessible by one hand, so you do have to lift it with two hands to pop it open. And then we have access to a very traditional and comfy looking ThinkPad keyboard situation. It's just super comfortable to type on for work, documents, essays, and getting things done. And like most laptops in the X1 Carbon line, it offers a backlit keyboard as well, which is easy to see in the dark. Plus the power key is separated from the main keyboard, making it hard to accidentally trigger. The 3rd gen model was also a return to form when it comes to layout compared to the 2nd gen model, which some would argue was too experimental by incorporating a touch bar-like capacitive row replacing the function keys, which unfortunately through time has a tendency to yellow and the lights become dim and hard to see. So repairability was not quite as good as a conventional row, and perhaps more importantly, some of the layout, including the shift key and caps lock, got squeezed and moved around and just made for a little more of an awkward situation. But really the 3rd gen is what brought it back to the layout that fans of ThinkPads know and love so much. Still, it was cool to see Lenovo experiment with a feature that was eventually borrowed by Apple with their touch bar, albeit with a OLED color screen and not just black and white monochrome. We also had on select models a fingerprint scanner on the side, which even to this day works really well, though it does require a swipe as opposed to being a simple tap or touch like on newer sensors. And then like all ThinkPads, there is that famous red dimple there, track point navigation, which some folks will love, since your fingers are going to be closer to the keyboard, and some people will say it's going to get you faster input. The hinge of the X1 Carbon can fold completely flat, so in the accidental case that a child bumps it, it's not going to break, although it's not a touch-enabled model on the base variant that we have here, which is 1080p. However, it is a TN panel, which is a little bit frustrating even for a 2015 device, since it was really a flagship-grade laptop. However, there were upgradable versions that could bump it up to Quad HD or 2K resolution, and also has IPS. The palm rest materials are also made from the same magnesium alloy plus carbon fiber and a little bit of a soft touch finish, which makes it very easy on your wrists as you're getting things done. Underneath the hood, there were i5 and i7 configurations. All models though came with the same integrated Intel HD graphics, so not the strongest in the world there. RAM also came in either 4, 8, or 16 gigabyte configurations and was soldered to the motherboard. Despite the portability though, the X1 Carbon is still military specified. So again, if you're a little more rough, you accidentally drop it, it's probably going to survive better than other laptops. Moving into performance, first of all, the fingerprint scanner is at the very least quite fast and responsive, as you can see there, even here in 2023. But on the standard panel, I would say brightness is only average and should be used in more shaded or indoor environments. If it's in direct sunlight, it might be a bit more of a struggle to see. And here's the backlight on the keyboard, which is actually quite easy to use as well. Tapping on function and spacebar will go through some of the modes where you can actually make it brighter or dimmer. Otherwise, the SSD keeps things relatively snappy when it comes to just navigating around the UI. It's still not too bad, I would say. And in terms of available storage, after the OS is installed and upgraded to Windows 11, you get roughly 200 gigabytes if you're going for the 256 gig variant. Although Windows 11 is a little bit heavier than Windows 10 when it comes to widgets and some of the extra animations, but it's not too bad. You'll see some moments of occasional jumpiness, but everything is still operational and keeps up well enough for regular usage. I will also mention that you can toggle between a more power saving mode, which will drop the CPU performance, versus a maximum performance mode, which will make some of the animations and applications run even faster, but expect the battery to also decrease. When it comes to loading back web pages, it's still a relatively good experience, as you can tell there. Even on heavier pages with videos and elements, scrolling still it feels smooth enough, and generally speaking with Chrome, you can open up around 6 to 8 tabs and things are still quite zippy as you're jumping back and forth between them, which is quite good. Part of the experience here is also bolstered by that glass trackpad, which is super smooth and actually very good when it comes to pinch to zoom gestures and swiping up and down, compared to some of the plastic trackpad ThinkPads, especially in their more budget collection, tend to be a lot more hit and miss when it comes to responsiveness. Granted, again, under some of the more higher performance modes, you will hear that fan kick in. It's definitely not one of the most quiet units in the world as far as the fan noise is concerned, but it's also not bad in terms of kind of a gentle white noise. Just note, it's not going to be completely silent. And some takeaway is the speakers do get actually quite loud, which is good. Although the placement on the back as opposed to the front does mean that you can get obstructed if you're on softer surfaces compared to a flat surface where it might bounce and just sound a little bit better. But nonetheless, not too bad for a laptop speaker, that is. Full HD videos pose no issues for this thing to stream, whether it's YouTube or Netflix, getting almost no drop frames. Especially once the video starts to play back, it's not going to pose too many issues. As you can see there, still quite fast. Again, thanks to the strong antenna and reception quality, you don't have to be waiting too long. Since the screen on this thing really is only 1080p, I would say anything beyond that point is kind of overkill, to be honest, unless you are connected to a 4K monitor. And as usual, synthetic benchmarks aren't everything, but just providing a frame of reference. The i5 5300U on this 3rd gen Carbon gets a score of around 2,741 on Passmark. This is a dual-core chipset with 4 threads, and this is actually still a touch stronger than some of the entry-level, say, Intel Celerons and Pentiums being sold in some of the budget newer computers here in 2023. So you're not getting crazy fast performance, but at the same time, it's not necessarily outdated yet, as long as you have your expectations modest. As additional context, the 4th gen Carbon has a Passmark score which is a little bit higher than 3,000, but it's actually not a super noticeable difference. as well as the 5th gen Carbon is then using an i5 7200U, which is now getting close to 3400 on Passmark. But a bigger difference can be discerned starting with the 6th gen Carbon and newer when Intel finally upgraded their architecture. So the i5 8250U, for instance, is now quad-core compared to only dual-core, so we now have a score closer to 6000. So if you're after power and performance, a 6th gen Carbon and newer is still going to be your best bet, but that will also be a pretty big price delta compared to earlier models. So this is still quite adequate when it comes to document work, whether it's for PDFs, Word, Excel. That provides no difficulty for the Carbon 3rd gen to handle. So lighting, computing tasks, a little bit of schoolwork, as well as like an office work, it's still something this thing does quite well in, especially with, again, the excellent keyboard and trackpad. Light creative work like photo editing, as well as maybe stitching together some full HD clips, is usually not too problematic, although the fans will definitely start to whirl up. But if you're trying to do more demanding edits, something in 4K, for example, it's just not going to be the best experience just because of the, again, slightly aging chipset coupled with not a very strong GPU at the end of the day. As far as gaming is concerned, older titles as well as emulation style games, that should be fine. But for anything that is really new, you're going to have better luck using streaming, such as Amazon's Luna or Microsoft's xCloud, since again, this thing has a pretty good, reliable internet connection at the very least. So that's more or less it as far as our revisited review of the Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Carbon 3rd generation model. Used ThinkPads typically offer excellent value and bang for the buck, and in this case I would say that statement is mostly true as long as you're looking for a light computing device. Certainly don't expect miracles, but you are paying under $100 for a pretty compact, well-built machine that can handle basics like web browsing, watching back videos is fine, and for document work, email work, it's super comfortable with an excellent keyboard and that glass trackpad, which still feels very premium, plus great I/O on an ultra-portable computer, which is very rare to find. It shows what you can expect for a super budget ThinkPad, which is still really not bad in terms of their hardware and fit and finish. So you can check out more details if interested in the links down below, but for now that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been a look back at a Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Carbon 3rd gen here in 2023.